My name's Kyle, I'm 35, and I've been married to my wife, Jessica, who's 32, for 8 years. Up until recently, I thought we had a solid relationship. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but who doesn't? Jessica's always been confident and outgoing, qualities that drew me to her in the first place. But lately, I've started to wonder if I missed the warning signs. The story starts with a party. Jessica had been invited to a birthday celebration for one of her work friends, Sarah. It wasn't really my scene. Loud music, cocktails, and networking aren't my idea of a good time, so I stayed home. Jessica didn't seem to mind. In fact, she looked thrilled to have a night out without me. She spent an hour getting ready, trying on different dresses before finally settling on a red one that hugged her curves a little more than I was comfortable with. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to seem controlling. "Don't wait up," she said with a wink as she headed out the door. I stayed up anyway, scrolling through my phone and half watching TV, waiting for her to come home. She rolled in around 2 a.m., her makeup smudged, hair disheveled, and smelling like a mix of alcohol and perfume. "Good party?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "It was fine," she said, brushing past me toward the bedroom. Her tone was sharp, almost dismissive. That's when I noticed something strange. Jessica was holding her heels in one hand, but her walk seemed odd, like she was uncomfortable. At first, I chalked it up to a long night of dancing, but when I went into the bedroom after her, I saw her tossing her dress into the laundry bin and realized she wasn't wearing any underwear. "Jessica," I said slowly, my stomach tightening. "Where's your, you know?" She froze for a split second before shrugging. "Oh, they ripped," she said nonchalantly, avoiding my gaze. "I threw them away. No big deal." It felt like a lie. Something about her tone, her body language, but I didn't push it. I didn't want to seem paranoid or insecure. Still, a gnawing feeling crept into my gut, and I couldn't shake it. Little did I know, that night was just the beginning of a much bigger nightmare. The next morning, Jessica was acting unusually snappy. She spent most of the day glued to her phone, barely looking up when I tried to talk to her. Anytime I asked a simple question, "How was the party?" or "Who was there?" her answers were short and vague. "It was fine," she'd say, or "Just the usual work crowd." Normally, Jessica would gush about her night out, telling me funny stories or complaining about the people who annoyed her. But this time, nothing. It felt off. That uneasy feeling I'd had the night before started to grow. I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head. Her coming home, disheveled and defensive, the missing underwear, the rushed excuse. Something wasn't adding up, but I told myself I was overthinking it. A few days later, I decided to do something I'd never done in our entire marriage. I checked her phone. Jessica had left it on the counter while she was in the shower, and my curiosity got the better of me. At first, I didn't find anything suspicious. Her messages with her friends seemed normal, until I noticed a name I didn't recognize. Ethan. There weren't many messages, but the ones I saw made my stomach drop. "Ethan, last night was wild. I can't stop thinking about you." "Jessica. Same. But we have to be careful." "Ethan, don't worry. Your secret's safe with me," winking face. My hands started shaking as I stared at the screen. This couldn't be real. Jessica, the woman I'd built my life with, was talking to another man about something she clearly didn't want me to know. I wanted to scream, to confront her right then and there, but I didn't. I needed more information. If I accused her without proof, she'd just deny it or turn it around on me. So, I took screenshots of the messages and sent them to my own phone before putting hers back where I found it. When Jessica came out of the shower, she was back on her phone within seconds, smiling faintly at whatever was on the screen. My chest tightened. I wanted to rip the phone out of her hands and demand answers, but I kept my cool. "Who's Ethan?" I asked casually, testing the waters. Jessica froze for a split second before shrugging. "Oh, he's just someone from work." "Why?" "Just curious," I said, forcing a smile. Her response was too quick, too dismissive. That single moment confirmed what I already knew. Jessica was hiding something. After seeing those texts, I couldn't think straight. Every smile Jessica gave me felt fake, Every word she said like another lie. I tried to act normal around her, but the doubt was eating me alive. Who was this Ethan guy? What exactly had happened at that party? Over the next few days, I became hyper-aware of Jessica's behavior. She was on her phone constantly, smiling at messages she never shared with me. She started dressing up more for work, putting extra effort into her makeup and wearing outfits I hadn't seen her wear in years. I knew I had to dig deeper. One night, after she went to bed, I waited until she was asleep before grabbing her phone again. I knew her passcode. She hadn't changed it yet, and my heart raced as I unlocked it. The texts with Ethan had been deleted. That wasn't surprising, but what I did find shocked me even more. A series of photos in her hidden album. The first photo was harmless enough. Jessica and her coworkers posing at the party, drinks in hand. But as I scrolled, the images became more damning. One photo showed her sitting on a couch next to a man who I assumed was Ethan, her hand resting on his knee. Another showed them dancing, her arms around his neck, their bodies pressed together. But the last photo was the one that broke me. It was blurry, taken in what looked like a dimly lit bedroom. Jessica was sitting on the edge of a bed, her dress hiked up slightly, her hair messy. Ethan was standing in front of her, shirtless, with a cocky grin on his face. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My chest tightened, and my hands shook as I stared at the screen. This wasn't just harmless flirting. This was proof that something physical had happened. I saved the photos and sent them to my own phone, my mind racing with anger and disbelief. How could she do this to me? How long had this been going on? The next day, I started asking questions. How's work been? I asked over breakfast, trying to keep my tone light. Fine, she said without looking up from her phone. Anything exciting happen at that party? Jessica froze for a split second before forcing a smile. Not really. Just the usual work drama. Her lie was so blatant it made my blood boil. But I still wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed more. I couldn't take it anymore. The lies, the sneaking around, the fake smiles. It was all too much. I had the proof I needed, and now it was time to confront Jessica. That evening, after dinner, I sat her down in the living room. She was scrolling through her phone as usual, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. Jessica, I said, my voice steady but cold, we need to talk. She glanced up, her brows knitting together. About what? About the party. About Ethan. About why you came home that night without any underwear. Her face changed in an instant. The casual indifference vanished, replaced by something I couldn't quite read. Panic, maybe, or guilt. What are you talking about? She said, feigning confusion. Don't play dumb, I said, pulling out my phone. I opened the photo album where I'd saved the screenshots and the pictures. One by one, I showed them to her, the texts, the photos of her with Ethan, and finally the one of her on the bed with him. Her face went pale, and her hands started to shake. How did you? It doesn't matter how, I snapped. What matters is that you lied to me. You cheated on me. And you dragged me through this charade like I'm an idiot. So, Jessica, tell me the truth. What the hell happened at that party? She opened her mouth, closed it again, then started crying. Kyle, I didn't mean for it to happen. Didn't mean for what to happen? I demanded. Be specific, Jessica. I want to hear you say it. I made a mistake, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I had too much to drink, and Ethan, he was flirting with me, and one thing led to another. One thing led to another? I repeated, my voice rising. Jessica, you slept with him. You cheated on me, and now you're sitting here trying to make it sound like some accident? Own it. I was drunk, she shouted, her tears turning to anger. I wasn't thinking straight. Okay? It didn't mean anything. It was stupid, and I regret it. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Regret it? You don't regret what you did. You regret that you got caught. Her face crumpled again, and she reached for me, but I pulled away. Kyle, please, she said, her voice breaking. I love you. I made a mistake, but we can work through this. I'll do anything. Counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. I stared at her, my chest tight with anger and hurt. The woman sitting in front of me, crying and begging for forgiveness, wasn't the same woman I thought I'd married. I don't know if there's anything left to work through, Jessica, I said quietly. You broke us. Jessica's words hung in the air, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. She sat on the couch, her face streaked with tears, while I stood frozen, trying to process everything. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but all I could feel was a hollow ache in my chest. Eventually, I walked out of the room without saying another word. I went to the guest bedroom, locking the door behind me. I could hear her faintly calling my name, but I ignored her. For the first time in our marriage, I couldn't stand to be near her. The next morning, Jessica tiptoed around me like I was a ticking time bomb. She didn't mention the argument or her confession, but her guilt was written all over her face. I barely looked at her, let alone spoke. I spent the day going through my thoughts, trying to figure out what to do next. The idea of divorce loomed over me like a dark cloud, but part of me wasn't ready to make that decision yet. I wasn't sure if it was love, denial, or sheer exhaustion that held me back, but I knew I needed time to think. Jessica, on the other hand, seemed determined to pretend nothing had happened. She cooked dinner, asked how my day was, even tried to sit next to me on the couch like we were fine. Jessica, I said, breaking the silence, you can't just act like everything's okay. It's not. She put her fork down, her hands trembling. I'm trying, Kyle. I'm trying to show you that I'm sorry, that I'm committed to fixing this. Fixing this, I repeated, my voice flat. You can't fix something like this overnight. Do you even understand what you've done? You didn't just cheat, you broke my trust, made a fool out of me. And you think a nice dinner is going to fix that? Her eyes filled with tears again, but I didn't care. For once, I was the one in control, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me with apologies and crocodile tears. I need space, I said finally. I don't know if this marriage is salvageable, but I need time to figure out what I want. Until then, don't expect things to go back to normal. Jessica nodded silently, wiping her tears. I'll do whatever you need me to do, she said softly. I didn't respond. I got up, grabbed my keys and left the house, driving aimlessly until the sun went down. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I couldn't escape the images in my head. Jessica with Ethan, her disheveled look when she came home that night, the lies she told so easily. Every time I closed my eyes, it all came rushing back, and the anger, sadness, and humiliation hit me like waves. Jessica tried to give me space, but it felt forced. She'd leave notes on the counter. Apologies, promises to change, pleas for counseling. She even deleted all her social media accounts, claiming it was to focus on us. But her efforts felt hollow. They weren't about repairing the damage. They were about easing her guilt. One night, as I lay awake in the guest room, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessica. Jessica, can we please talk? I need to know where we stand. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. We can talk tomorrow. I'll let you know when I'm ready. The next morning, I sat her down at the kitchen table. She looked nervous, her hands gripping a mug of coffee like it was her lifeline. Jessica, I started, my voice calm but firm. I've been thinking a lot about this, about us, and the truth is, I don't know if I can get past what you've done. She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand to stop her. Let me finish. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because it's the truth. You cheated on me. You lied to me. You came home from that party, looked me in the eye, and made up excuses instead of owning what you did. And that's not something I can just forget. Jessica's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. I know, Kyle. I know I messed up. I hate myself for it. I've been trying to figure out why I did it, why I risked everything, and I don't even have a good answer. I was stupid and selfish. Her words sounded sincere, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still holding something back. Why Ethan? I asked, my voice quieter. Why him? Jessica looked down at her hands. He made me feel wanted, she admitted. I know that sounds awful, but things between us have felt so routine lately. And Ethan, he paid attention to me, complimented me, made me feel alive. Her words stung, but they also revealed the cracks in our marriage that I hadn't wanted to see. Had I taken her for granted? Had I been so focused on work and responsibilities that I'd missed the signs? Still, none of that justified what she'd done. So, instead of talking to me, you turned to him? I said bitterly. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I don't expect you to forgive me, Kyle, but I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I sat there, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hold on to the life we'd built together. But another part of me, the part that felt betrayed and broken, was screaming that it was too late. I need more time, I said finally. This isn't something I can decide overnight. Jessica nodded, wiping her tears. Take all the time you need, she said softly. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the house became unbearable. Jessica's attempts to fix things only made it worse. She'd swing between overcompensating with kind gestures and breaking down in tears, begging me to forgive her. I kept my distance, spending nights in the guest room and avoiding deep conversations. I could tell she was frustrated, but I wasn't ready to give her the closure she wanted. The breaking point came one evening when I came home late from work. Jessica was sitting at the kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her. She looked up as I walked in, her expression a mix of anger and desperation. We can't keep doing this, Kyle, she said, her voice trembling. You're shutting me out. I know I screwed up, but I can't fix it if you won't talk to me. I sighed, setting my keys down on the counter. Jessica, I've told you I need time. Pushing me isn't going to change anything. Her frustration boiled over. Time for what? To punish me? To make me feel like a terrible person every single day? I get it, Kyle, I made a mistake. But how long are you going to keep me in limbo? Her words lit a fire in me. A mistake, I snapped. Cheating on me, lying to me, coming home from that party and pretending everything was fine. That's not a mistake, Jessica. That's a series of choices. And now you're mad because I won't sweep it under the rug fast enough for you. Jessica recoiled, her face flushing with anger. I'm not asking you to sweep it under the rug. I'm asking you to decide if you still want this marriage. Because if you don't, then let's stop dragging this out. The room fell silent, her words hanging in the air like a challenge. For a moment I couldn't speak. Was I dragging it out? Was I holding on to something that was already broken? Finally, I spoke, my voice low but steady. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Jessica. And without trust, what do we have left? Her face crumpled, and she sank into the chair, burying her face in her hands. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know how to fix this. Neither did I. After that conversation, the silence between Jessica and me became louder than ever. We existed in the same house like strangers, going through the motions but never really connecting. The weight of everything, her betrayal, my anger, the broken pieces of our marriage, was suffocating. One evening, as I sat alone in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, I came to a realization. I couldn't keep living like this. The limbo wasn't just hurting me. It was hurting her, too. Jessica may have been the one who shattered our marriage, but holding on to this broken version of what we had was only prolonging the pain for both of us. The next morning, I made a call to a divorce lawyer. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the only way forward. I couldn't force myself to trust her again, and I wasn't willing to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if she'd betray me again. That evening, I sat Jessica down in the living room. She looked nervous, her hands fidgeting in her lap as I took a seat across from her. Kyle, what is it? She asked cautiously. I took a deep breath. Jessica, I've made a decision. I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend that everything's going to be okay when it's not. Her face fell, tears already welling up in her eyes. You're leaving me, she said, her voice cracking. I'm filing for divorce, I said, my tone firm but calm. This isn't what I wanted, but it's what I need. I can't live in a marriage without trust, and I can't keep punishing myself, or you, for what happened. Jessica started sobbing, her hands covering her face. Kyle, please, she begged. Don't do this. I love you. I'll do anything. Just give me another chance. I shook my head, the weight of my decision settling over me. I've given this a lot of thought, Jessica. I'm not doing this out of anger or spite. I can't rebuild what you destroyed.
I'm sorry.
Her sobs turned into quiet cries as she slumped back into the couch. I felt a pang of guilt, but I reminded myself that this wasn't just about her feelings. This was about my peace, my sanity, and my future. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Once the decision was made, everything moved quickly. I contacted my lawyer again, and we began the process of filing for divorce. Jessica didn't fight it. Whether it was guilt or acceptance, I didn't know. She cried during our conversations but cooperated with the legal proceedings, agreeing to most of the terms without argument. The hardest part was dividing our lives. Splitting finances, deciding who would keep what. It was like untangling a knot that had been growing for years. Jessica moved out of the house a month later, renting an apartment across town. She wanted to stay close, though we didn't have kids to keep us tied together. One night, while boxing up the last of her things, Jessica stopped and looked at me. Kyle, she said softly, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but for what it's worth, I really am sorry. For everything. I nodded, the familiar ache in my chest rising again. I know you are, I said, my voice even. But sorry doesn't fix this. You made your choices, Jessica, and now we're living with them. She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. I hope you find happiness, Kyle. You deserve that much. When she left that night, the house felt eerily quiet. For the first time in years, I was completely alone. No Jessica, no lingering tension, just silence. It was both freeing and terrifying. In the weeks that followed, I started to find pieces of myself again. I reconnected with old friends, picked up hobbies I'd neglected, and even started therapy to work through the anger and sadness. It wasn't easy, but every small step felt like progress. Jessica sent me an email once, about a month after the divorce was finalized. It was long and heartfelt, full of regret and reflections on what had happened. She said she hoped I could heal, that she'd never stop wishing she could undo the damage she'd caused. I read it once, then deleted it. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. The months after the divorce felt like stepping into uncharted territory. At first, I struggled with the silence of the house, the emptiness where Jessica's presence used to be. But over time, I started to see the quiet for what it was: peace. Therapy helped me process the whirlwind of emotions I'd been carrying. My therapist told me something that stuck. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about you. It's letting go of the anger so you can move forward. I'm not sure if I've fully forgiven Jessica yet, but I've started to let go. I don't wake up with the same heaviness in my chest anymore. I don't replay that night or the lies or the pictures over and over in my head. Life has been about small victories, rebuilding relationships with friends I'd drifted from, focusing on my work, and exploring hobbies I'd forgotten I loved. I even joined a hiking group, something I'd always wanted to try but never made time for. As for Jessica, I've heard bits and pieces from mutual acquaintances. She's still working at the same job, still renting her apartment. I don't know if she ever tried to make things work with Ethan, and honestly, I don't care. Her chapter in my life is closed. Looking back, I've learned a lot about myself and relationships. I've learned how important communication is, how ignoring small cracks can lead to a collapse, and how vital it is to trust your instincts. Most importantly, I've learned that no matter how painful a betrayal is, you can survive it. For anyone out there who's been through something similar, here's my advice. Don't rush the healing process. Feel the hurt, process the pain, and take the time to figure out what you need to move forward. And remember, your worth isn't tied to someone else's actions. I'm still figuring out what's next for me, but for the first time in a long time, I'm hopeful. and that feels like a pretty good start. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.